So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And also thank you to the College Recruiter team for putting on this wonderful schedule. We have quite a good event planned today, and we're very excited to be a part of that. So my name is Tarquin Clark. I lead the go-to-market team for our talent solution products at Google Cloud. I'm super excited to be moderating a panel shortly with our esteemed panelists who are sitting in the front row here. We have quite the group of industry experts. We have Jane Kettles from Great People. We have Joe Essenfeld from Jibe, Justin Lumby from TalentNet, and Rupesh Nair from Symphony Talent. You know, what brings us all together here today is our shared passion and interest, I should say, in better connecting job seekers with jobs. And we're going to be talking about the role that AI can play in doing just that. Before we get to the panel discussion, we're going to take a quick look at machine learning and some of the advances made in recent years to ultimately make our lives a whole lot easier. So machine learning is one branch in the field of artificial intelligence. It's a way to solve problems without explicitly codifying the solution. And it's a way to build a system that improves itself over time with more data and experience. At high level, machine learning is teaching computers to recognize patterns in the same way our brain does. So as humans, just as it's easier for us to distinguish the difference between a cat and a dog, it's actually much more difficult to teach a computer to do the same thing. In order to help train computers to think more like humans, we use a technology called neural networks. A neural network is essentially a mathematical model that works in a similar fashion to our brains. It takes an input through a series of processing steps in order to generate the output. The first neural network was developed around 60 years ago, in 1957. Commissioned by the United States Office of Naval Research, the perceptron, which you can see here, demonstrated an ability to identify different shapes. So often when people talk about AI and machine learning, they think it's only for experts. And certainly back then, if you wanted to work on ML, you needed access to extensive academic research and computing resources. But if we fast forward to today, we can see that just in the last 5 to 10 years, the number of products using ML has grown dramatically. Here you can see just a few products at Google now using AI. And it's because we've experienced the value of this technology firsthand that we believe that machine learning is a critical cloud service. Our teams have been busy building machine learning tools and infrastructure for the 22 million developers in the world, regardless of the level of their ML expertise. So when building these models, the key is to train the neural network to produce increasingly accurate results. So for example, in this image you see here, we might train a neural network on millions of photographs, which we label so that it's able to recognize, for example, people, places, or things. The photo at the top, you can see here, is labeled cat. We feed the photo through the network with each layer designed to identify different features. The first layer might simply be looking at the pixels in the photograph. The end result is an output, and in doing this, we're training the network to recognize the image as a cat. The next photo is a dog, and so on. So after the neural network has been trained, we can then use it to label images that it has never seen before. In this example, the network is designed to determine if the input image is a cat or a dog. As you can see, the network takes in the image, processes it through a series of different layers, and then correctly outputs with the label dog. Often this is with a confidence score based on a threshold that's been set. So that's a very quick summary of machine learning, but how can we use it to improve our businesses? According to industry analyst firm IDC, 90% of data, 90% of enterprise data, I should say, is unstructured. So unstructured data is mostly human-generated textual data, and it comes in many different languages. It comes from documents such as project and research reports, internal and external publications, product descriptions, work and governance procedures, and of course, emails. When you add semi-structured data, such as log files and other machine-generated data, we can start to gain a picture of the vast quantities of data that remains untreated today. With machine learning, companies now have the tools to make sense of this unstructured data. One example of that unstructured data is photographs. This is an image from Google Street View. Using machine learning, the Maps team were able to identify different types of unstructured data within these images and then make it useful. For example, you can see the street name, traffic signals, business names, and so on. The true value of these images was only later recognized when ML was applied to it. And it created a significant improvement in the product itself for all of the end users to benefit from. I'm willing to bet that your respective organizations have similarly valuable data, which when ML is applied, you can unlock the value. In Google Photos, we enable people to quickly find images simply by searching for them. With Google Translate, we're able to look at an image, in this case an exit sign, and then provide the output in multiple different languages. This is super handy when you're traveling in a foreign country, and what's more, the model is downloaded onto your phone, so it doesn't actually require internet connectivity. In Gmail, 12% of responses now sent on mobile are via Smart Reply. And the new Smart Compose feature is helping to save people from typing more than 1 billion characters every single week. In addition, machine learning is blocking more than 10 million spam messages every minute. Think about that. In the same amount of time it takes you to tie your shoelaces or peel an orange, 10 million spam email messages have been blocked. So how does this all apply with job search and helping folks find a job? So when we think about job search, it's really, searching for a job is one of the most consequential searches most of us will do in our lifetime. Gallup actually in 2017 also reported that more than half of US employees are actively looking for a job or watching job openings. Over the years, we know that the mechanics of job search have changed. As new technologies have emerged and matured, and you can see here going from offline with newspaper and print onto online, and you have job boards, job aggregators, career sites, and social sites. Yet it's actually hard to find evidence pointing to an increase of inefficiency of matching between jobs and job seekers. In fact, there's actually some evidence to suggest that the job market has become less efficient. One of the labor market indicators used by economists is called the Beveridge curve that you see here. This shows the relationship between unemployment and the job vacancy rate. Other things being equal, an increase in unemployment rate whilst the vacancy rate drops, in other words, more people are looking for jobs and more jobs are available, suggests a deterioration in the matching and hiring process in the economy. What economists call an outward shift in the Beveridge curve, and you can see that on the right-hand side there. Although the shifts in the Beveridge curve during the 21st century are not particularly large by historical standards, directionally, the observed shifts suggest that, if anything, job matching in the labor market has actually become less efficient. So there's many plausible explanations why technological advances do not seem to increase job market efficiency. One reason for this is as technology makes it easier for job seekers to apply for jobs, they actually end up applying for many more jobs, often jobs that they're not qualified for. This then shifts the volume onto employers who have to now sift through a growing number of applicants who are essentially a poor fit for the job. We started first exploring this notion in 2012, and we learned firsthand that machine learning can more efficiently match job seekers with jobs. So back then, so around six years ago, we were hiring approximately 10,000 people a year. Our Senior Vice President of People Operations and our VP of Staffing set forth the challenge to explore how we might 10x our hiring. We looked at all the different sources of hire, and we found the career site to be the most scalable source we had, with millions of visitors that come by every single month. In order to improve the pass-through rate, we started off by adding some advanced features to allow job seekers to drill into the results that they saw. After that, we began tuning the search algorithm and quickly found that there are many nuances to job search on both the job seeker side and the employer side. The first problem is that it's really easy to misunderstand the intent of the job seeker when you use keyword search. There's a few examples you can see up on the screen. So searching for dental assistant, for example, often returns assistant roles with dental benefits. The role benefits manager, we know, everyone in this room, to be a role that exists within human resources. However, the search service is looking for any manager job with benefits. Often manager jobs include benefits in the job description, and so the search service returns these roles. Similarly, if you search for server in San Jose, we know that the job seeker is actually looking for a role within restaurant and hospitality, except the search service is returning SQL Server administrator jobs for that location. Assuming all of the relevance issue results on the left-hand side are addressed, you then run into another problem that we call the secondary role issue, which really impacts seniority. So often within job descriptions, you see other roles included. So for example, an administrative assistant might report to a vice president, and a financial analyst might generate reports for the CFO. The second issue is on the employer side, in the sense that job titles don't actually make a lot of sense to anyone other than the hiring manager. On the right, you can see a list of job titles. They're confusing at best. So when you actually look at the query stream of what job seekers are searching for, and then when you look at what the job titles that employers have, you can really truly highlights the issue that job seekers and employers are speaking two completely different languages. And if you have a search technology and a search service that's trying to match on the search terms that are being used, these two worlds never meet. The first result you see up there, Reckon Asset Prop 1, is actually a recovery and asset protection manager. Even decoded, that's kind of confusing. It's what you and I might know as a security guard. So if you're a security guard, I see a very shocked face in the audience, so it's a great look. For a security guard, if you're searching for security guard on a company website or on a job board, etc., this role would never be returned because the search service cannot find this in the job description. So in order to address these challenges, we realized we could train models to understand jobs, companies, people, skills, and education. And so the first iteration of what is now our neural network that underpins our talent solution products was born. You can think of it really as a two-sided matching engine. It takes a resume or other form of candidate profile and a job description, and then runs them through a set of algorithms to produce the best possible match. It's really all about understanding the semantics that exist around people and the semantics that exist around jobs, and then using the power of machine learning to make the best match possible. Today, companies such as CareerBuilder, Marriott, and College Recruiter are using this service and reporting significant gains. This is the very same model that we used on our own career site and still to this day do, that has driven over a 28% increase in our pass-through rate. So as an example, Marriott hires over 100,000 people every single year. They weren't getting a lot of applicants to many of their open roles on their career site. They have lots of different brands within the organization. And interestingly, the job titles for people who clean guest rooms differ based on the brand. So for the Marriott, the role is called housekeeping. At the Westin, it's called house attendant. And at the more trendy W, it's called a room stylist. After working with the Jibe team to implement talent solution job search, the Marriott career site now returns, as you can see, multiple relevant roles for the more generic queries such as housekeeper. What's more, Marriott reported an increase in 23% of applicants and reduced time to hire by 17%. Our friends here at College Recruiter, also early adopters of the product, Talent Solution Job Search, have shared some great numbers as well. So the College Recruiter team has seen a 20% increase in click-through rate from job search to job detail, in addition to deeper engagement on the site. So that's the job seeker side. On the recruiter side, recruiters actually have a very tough job in trying to find great matches to roles. Often the tools that they have at their disposal let them down. And so we've developed a service that applicant tracking systems and other products can plug in to use to help power the search and also make the experience much more human. We've heard from many different recruiters that past candidates are the first place to look when sourcing for new jobs. At Google, we actually did an experiment a few years back. We analyzed 300,000 resumes from rejected software engineers. And we reran 10,000 of them through the process again. 150 people were hired. So the yield of 1.5% was six times greater than our regular recruiting yield of 0.25%. And if this is an interesting study, you can read all about it in the book Work Rules by our former SVP of People Operations, Laszlo Bach. Overall, the data shows that companies find existing candidates to be the second best source of hire after referrals. We see this actually play out in our hire product, where past candidates that have been found using the profile search service have a 40% greater chance of being hired. So integrating this technology into sourcing products ultimately saves recruiters time. Users no longer have to compose these rather complex Boolean searches that you see here in order to find the right role, the right candidates. Instead, the user just types in exactly what they're looking for, and we let the machines do the rest. So we've been using our profile search product within Hire since May with great results. And just last week, we made it generally available to all customers. This is actually a tweet from a Hire customer just last month, and a great example of how artificial intelligence can work alongside us each and every day in our careers, allowing us to spend less time in apps and more time with people. Before we close out, I just would like to demonstrate the importance of inclusiveness and taking steps to guard against reinforcing existing inequalities in job matching. AI is, after all, about pattern recognition. A potential risk is the data used to train and develop the models might contain human bias. To highlight this, let's do a quick exercise. If everyone in the room could imagine a shoe? Okay, so now raise your hand if you were thinking of a sneaker. It's a good number of hands. Heels? Boots? Any Brits with Wellington boots? Sorry. Yes, excellent. Okay, so I actually was kind of close, but I think heels won that, right? Yeah, okay, so given the majority of people in the room raised their hands for heels, we've actually immediately introduced a bias. So bias can come in 3 different forms. First of all, you have selection bias, which is from sampling in different data sources that are used. Next, there's latent bias, which is when the model is only shown a specific example. So for example, for what we just proved out in the room, if all shoes are labeled as heels, the model will be biased towards heels and not actually label sneakers correctly. And finally, there's interaction bias, which occurs when the users interact with the model. In this room, for example, if everyone submitted a pair of heels in a game, then that model would learn from that activity and then be biased towards heels. So it's really important to remember that any creator or influencer of technology has a responsibility to develop with inclusion as part of the design. And ultimately, we believe AI will have the greatest impact when everyone can access it and it's built with everyone's benefit in mind. So with that, I'd like to invite our panelists up to take a seat.
Great. So perhaps, Jane, if you'd like to just introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jane Kettles. I am co-founder and chief product officer at Great People. Great People offers our customers the ability to find, engage, and hire the best talent. We focus on talent CRM, recruitment marketing, and ATS. Very excited to be here. We do have a component that helps campus recruiters manage on-site campus event, and really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Jane. I'm Rupesh Nair. I'm the president and CEO of Symphony Talent. Symphony Talent has a talent marketing product, which basically provides a AI-driven, personalized experience for candidates, recruiters, and employees. And so excited to be here talking about this topic. Thanks.
Hello, excuse me, hello. Justin Lumby, I'm the Vice President of Technology Strategy with Talnet and a partner. Talnet is an enterprise recruitment platform used for talent attraction and engagement of top talent, as well as for our recruitment partners who use our tool and predominantly as an ATS for seeking out and identifying with the best candidates. And we're happy to be here today talking about machine learning and some of these advances with Google.
Thanks. I'm Joe Essenfeld, CEO and founder of Jibe. Jibe makes enterprise SaaS for career sites. So we power a lot of the high volume career sites around the world for companies like FedEx, Johnson & Johnson, Comcast, and PepsiCo. And we were excited to bring out some AI from Google with FedEx a couple years ago, and been really kind of cool to see the emotional connection of how it can improve the actual job search for job seekers. So it's been a great experience. Thanks.
Super. So we actually have a microphone just there if you have it. We'd like to, the panelists really want to have a very open debate. So the floor is immediately open for questions. We have a microphone right there. If you could just line up behind it. Before you ask your question, when it's your turn, please do just state your name and the company you're from. And then also the panelists that you'd like to direct the question specifically to. So do we have any initial takers? Oh, I should actually say that our panel discussion is about AI, the use of AI in recruiting. Initial questions? Excellent.
Yeah, my name's Alan Tidwell. I'm from Shanda Asset Management in Menlo Park. My question is just about low volume. If we have a low volume of recruiting and we don't have a large database of previous applicants, how can we use AI to improve our process and help us get better hiring results?
Sure. So I think one of the things that's important to appreciate is in many of the models that we're using today, and certainly the ones where we partner with Google, many of these models are developed out of large aggregate sets of data. So not necessarily just specific to one employer or a small employer. And I think so certainly you can benefit from that sort of stratified and large data set. So very much I think there's still a use case to use this within smaller organizations. Certainly a benefit if you've got a lot of data available to you, but still a lot of value, I think, even in a small environment as well, just because of the larger data set that you're benefiting from.
Yeah, and just to add on, when you're using low volume, you still have the searches which your candidates are doing, which can learn from all the data set from gathered from the rest of the organizations, and purely from an experience perspective, because low volume, you need to provide that seamless experience to your candidate. AI can be used, to improve that also.
I also think targeting those data sets and leveraging AI, you're casting a larger net. You may not bring back your traditional set of titles or job titles. It may be people who have more of an aptitude for that role. So there may be more of an opportunity for the recruiters to do selling as opposed to sourcing.
Have any of your customers raised this specific challenge with you today, or?
I think the biggest thing is competition, probably, especially as it relates to campus and new hire internships, et cetera.
Yep.
So competition is big. Reducing the friction kind of in the process, and certainly intelligent automation can help you in those areas.
Great.
Yeah, and the related problem obviously is that you're kind of, I would like to use the economist term, like the lemons problem, right? When you kind of have lots of jobs and lots of people, you're kind of trying to figure out what's the best match, and that's been the biggest problem which our clients are trying to solve, because they can only, even in the low volume case, they can only go to certain places right now. They cannot reach out, specifically in terms of college recruitment, they cannot reach out to the larger volume. What we are able to solve with these solutions is the fact that now you can actually increase your reach significantly, and then use AI to really kind of figure out who are the candidates you want to really talk to, rather than being very selective on kind of reaching out to specific colleges or specific people around in the network.
So now the AI has been adding a lot of value to the recruitment, and there is no doubts about it. There are so many technical solutions which different companies are offering using AI technology. So some recruiting group who just starting on looking at different technical solutions, what are some of the factors they should consider before selecting a specific tool or going that route?
I'm happy to start this one. I think the most important thing is to define the problem that you're trying to solve first. So don't get the technology looking for a problem, get a problem looking for technology. And I think if you're able to do that successfully, and then you see how AI can come in and help solve that better and faster, I think you'll win. I think kind of tying this back to the lower volume question, we've seen lower volume sometimes mean don't use AI, don't use technology. If there's a small enough data set, as Tarquin said earlier, I think Stephen said earlier, AI is not as smart as our own brain. So if you can still leverage yourself, then let's not take ourselves out of the equation yet until it makes really a lot of sense, and that usually happens at scale.
Yeah, I think just to add to the selection, and I would agree, to focus on the problem in identifying a solution. And often that becomes, certainly with the enterprise as well, is looking at, sort of once you've identified what that problem is, and you're now looking for technology, but also looking at the incumbent ecosystem that you have, and how is this going to play with existing processes and workflows and the technology environment that you're operating in, and it's going to be suitable and not create new fragmented processes.
Yeah, and recruitment is pretty much, if you think about your recruitment life cycle, like an overall marketing life cycle, you kind of identify where your problem exists. Is it in the top of the funnel? Use AI to solve that. Is it that you have too many candidates? Let's use AI to kind of narrow things down. If you're having issues with engagement, try to solve that, right? So if you hear about these tools in the around, they're solving specific issues, whether it's the searching, whether it's the how I'm engaging with the candidate, or even creating that volume which you need, right? So identify what the problem is again, but you can think about it as the life cycle and try to solve for it.
Yeah, I think you need to look at the foundation of your processes and make sure that there's a framework for checks and balances to understand if there's correctional steps that you need to take, identifying the factors that, based on standardization, may impact results. As we learned, machines learn patterns, and they're constantly rerunning those patterns. So I think just having awareness of what's happening with the different transactional steps in your process and how you're going to enable AI, and just have a foundation for those checks and balances, I think, are important at the beginning.
Great. I think it's actually a really great question that probably a lot of people and a lot of organizations actually have is, there's many different places you can apply AI. Certainly, I was walking the floor at HR Tech, and there's an awful lot of products and solutions offered this year, and increasingly around AI. So what would you recommend specifically to an organization that comes to your companies, with some challenges or problems, and how do you get started? Because often with new technology, it's more of a trust issue, and once you get up and running with something, then you feel a lot more comfortable, and then you can kind of broaden and go on to apply in different places once that's been established.
Yeah, and I think you need to look at your process, and where there's an opportunity to be flexible, that you could potentially leverage AI, but you don't have to do it all from the ground up.
Yep.
You need to have some flexibility, and then measure and see where it's impacting, where your baselines are, and what the lift is you're getting.
Yeah, and since this is a college recruiting event, maybe I can focus a little bit on the specific problems, as college recruiters or you might be facing, and how to solve for that. Obviously, searching is one of the biggest problem, right? And talked a little bit about it. Your graduate comes onto your website, your candidate portal, and they're looking for a job. I think that's when making that very specific and focusing on that and bringing in AI is something you can bring in pretty quickly, because as a graduate, I frankly sometimes don't know what I'm looking for, and my searches are a little bit more vaguer. And kind of giving that experience to your candidate who's looking for that job is the first thing you can easily solve. The second piece, when you think about how do you manage your events, is it virtual event? Is it a very specific physical event, and how to manage that, and how do we use AI to then have those conversations pre and post those events, right? Because at the end of the day, the use of AI is to do what humans can do, but at scale, right? So how do you kind of train your AI to kind of understand that and then reach that scale which you need to. But at the end of the day, you still as a recruiter are focused on really having those human conversations and really managing that final matching, because at the end of the day, AI can only get you so far from a matching perspective.
Yeah, maybe just I can address this from a recruitment perspective. We have the benefit of working with a large pool of recruiters, both in defining use cases for our product, but also later on when we go through user acceptance testing on different features that we've developed. And one of the things I know we were talking before about pass-through rates and 1.5%, and at Google even sort of 0.25. So if you think traditionally, there's a lot of sort of tedious and task-based sort of administrative work that a recruiter can go through in identifying, whether it's somebody coming out as a freshman graduate of college, or whether it's a professional. So for us, it's really not about sort of taking away from the recruiter's experience, but really adding a net benefit to it, and allowing them to focus more on the strategic pieces of their role, and being more of a strategic talent advisor, and being able to get out there into the market and understand some of those new grads coming out of school, and what sort of makes them great, instead of kind of click on 99 resumes that are irrelevant for your role. So that's really where we see sort of a benefit specifically to recruiters.
Yeah, I think it's all about maximizing the value for the time investment that you're going to put in to solve this problem. So when we work with typically larger employers, we want to understand what people they need to recruit that's actually going to make a business impact, that's going to get noticed all around the organization, and then understand the process and problems around those. So we just want to concentrate that value, so the time spent investing in technology is going to give a really good noticeable return, and then result in more projects and more investment. So we'll try and start with the highest value and go from there.
My name is Keith Cressy. I'm with Duff & Phelps. My question is in regards for AI, in regards to diversity hiring. At Duff & Phelps, we really look to kind of focus on that, and I want to see kind of how AI can, help us with those efforts.
So again, focusing on the problem, at this point, the problem you're trying to solve is a specific type of candidate at the end of the day, which you want to kind of get into the portfolio or get into your life cycle. So when you think about the recruiter side of AI, you can start, again, without thinking about, obviously there are certain aspects around what data and what not to use and things like that, and we can get to it. For example, when we started using last name and first name as part of AI, it started making predictions around, we started making more hires similar to a certain hire as compared to the other, right? So as you train the AI, kind of ensuring that it doesn't have the bias is important. But in this use case, you're trying to look for, let's say, a specific type of skill set, let's say military, right? Or in that case, what you're really training the AI at that point, and I'm sure most of the tools we work with provide the capability to kind of train the AI on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for more of a military type hire, you're kind of telling the AI to look for more of that and try to sort your candidates based on that. So kind of getting through, one of the aspects is that getting through the mass and trying to figure out the candidates you're looking for who are more suited to your diversity needs is one. Right? The second aspect is the conversations you're having. I think it's important part of the AI is around what type of conversations you want to have as a company and curating content in that area and letting AI kind of push it through to the people so that then people who are actually thinking about that content who are more similar to the way you want people to be hired into the organization can then be leveraged to kind of drive more of that candidates into the volume, right? So again, you can solve it by trying to, the question is again, is volume the issue that you want to generate more of those type of candidates, or is the issue that you want to sort out and figure out those type of candidates, and based on that, AI could be used on the top of the funnel or the mid part of the funnel, depending upon where your problem lies.
I can just add quickly, we work with a number of large organizations that have different diversity strategies in place, and they'll go about it in different ways. So either they'll have certain sort of, lead aspects to their strategy, or this will be something that they measure through lag indicators and analytics. So if it's more of a, we'll call it a passive strategy, where you're looking at lag analytics, then typically for them it's most important that they are exposing themselves to the correct populations and events, academic institutions, whatever it is, and then sort of measuring based on output on how successful that is. Where it would get a little bit, I think, more tricky is if it's sort of on the active lead side, because we're talking right now algorithmically about trying to remove bias from algorithms. If you're going to actively do it sort of from a lead perspective, then you almost need to, with intention, insert some level of bias, right, to try to promote those results. So we've seen enterprises that approach this from sort of both perspectives. I would say sort of the lag is more prevalent and making sure that sort of they're in the right places and recruiting in the right places and then measuring it. But we are certainly seeing this come up as more of an active lead strategy as well.
Just one last thing to add too, as a caution with AI. I mean, AI is an amplifier of existing behavior. So if you are thinking that you need to have more diversity and change behavior, AI may not be the first thing to look at to do that. It might be taking a more conscious approach to change your recruiting process. And then once you establish those changes, then sure, this could potentially amplify that and do that better, but I probably wouldn't start thinking about AI in terms of improving diversity as a first step.
Yeah, you do have a point there, Joe, and I think using AI for sourcing itself may not, kind of using it to sort people out may not be the best place to start, but the other aspect of AI is kind of giving that one-on-one conversation and creating that personalization. So that element is very useful when you're basically recruiting in diversity, because you're thinking about a specific type of persona and ensuring that you're able to have those right conversations and personalize in that area more than the rest of the areas. So it's not necessarily introducing a bias into your sourcing process, but increasing the amount of conversations you are having with a specific persona and ensuring that it's more one-on-one.
Hi, my name is Tanya, and I work in government. And this question is similar. It's related to diversity hiring around disability specifically. If you've adjusted your recruitment strategies and taken different lead measures already to outreach that population, and you aren't seeing kind of a return in terms of increased applicants, do you have any specific examples around disability, diversity, hiring, inclusion, or even upskilling within companies as applied to AI? And I know that's very particular, but that's sort of what I'm after today.
One area that I think could be really interesting is improving the accessibility of career websites. It's like this gray area where there aren't very clearly defined standards that everyone has to follow. There are recommendations that people should follow as best practice, and even doing them effectively on responsive design on complicated websites is really hard, specifically around screen readers and technology. I think there's a really interesting opportunity for having AI analyze your career sites and make better recommendations of how to make them more accessible. Because this is one of those fuzzy area problems that AI can actually come in and give some insight because of the scale and scope of data and user behavior that would happen on those career sites. So to me, that would be a really cool application of how to do that. And we're seeing a lot more energy around making sure career sites are more accessible in a useful way, and across all of our clients we're getting asked to do much more rigorous testing. So I think with that type of pull from companies that are willing to invest in it, it could be another area where you could use AI rather than finding people, actually making the quality of their experience better, which would hopefully increase adoption as a result.
You know, one of the features we introduced was called commute time, and in order to for this feature to be effective, it was important to understand the location of the business. And a lot of organizations weren't actually providing the location of the workplace in their job descriptions. And so, I mean, when you think about that, that seems crazy. You're applying for a job and you don't know where it's going to be. So as an employer, it's a basic level of thing that you should be doing. And I think it also holds true. You know, obviously a lot can be achieved with AI, but also making sure that as an employer, you're providing the information that's necessary for the job seeker to better understand the role and also better understand what facilities that are available for a future employee of that organization.
My name is Derek Zeller. I'm with Engage Talent. One of the things, I've been in the business 23 years. I've been a recruiter, sourcer, you name it, I've done it. One of the things that I'm starting to see, and I'm also a futurist, is things like GDPR that's happened in Europe, and now with the privacy concerns with Facebook, what LinkedIn just did, the day before Thanksgiving, all of your connections, you cannot see their email addresses anymore. It all disappeared. As a sourcer, I mean, I've heard a lot of inbound. I'm hearing a lot about inbound, and that's the whole post and pray thing. As a sourcer, as a person going out and looking for Rupesh, because that's the person I want to have come work for my company, how do you see these privacy laws going to affect AI in recruiting and staffing?
I'm happy to start. I think that in technology we constantly see trends of decentralization followed by re-centralization. And I think as you're seeing some of this privacy, it's forcing some of these sites like LinkedIn to own and control this data and do it a little bit more responsibly than what was being done in a more decentralized model. I remember back when I was on AOL and everything was on one app. I had my chat, my web, it was all there. It was very convenient. And then it all got broken up into pieces. And in that decentralization, we sacrificed some privacy. And I think as the market is looking to get that privacy back, there's no easy way to solve it. Blockchain didn't give us the magic formula where we could all be encrypted on a distributed ledger. So I think we're now going to look at centralization, trust those players to take care of our data a little bit more responsibly, but it's going to cause more inconvenience around sourcing. So it might drive you to work closely with LinkedIn to get better ways of contacting those people instead of relying on an email address. So I just think it's related to those two trends that we typically will see.
Yeah, I think specifically with GDPR in mind, so GDPR, it does introduce complexities as a technology provider, but certainly also as a recruiter as well. You need access to information to contact candidates, et cetera. And when you look at GDPR, it really doesn't intend to interrupt or attempt to disrupt those transactions. What really underpins it is a level of transparency, and that a job seeker that's putting their CV or their resume out, whether it's on a job board or a career site or whatever, is willing to do so and is looking to be contacted. And I think it's really trying to prevent where, misuse of data, where that opt-in is not being provided. But I would agree that there's definitely some ambiguity. I mean, it's not been extensively tested, certainly in courts through Europe, anyways. And I think there's a lot that will come out of it. But ultimately, I think we'll see similar regulations roll out nationally across the U.S. and North America as well.
Yeah, and one of the areas, I think this, for the sources specifically, I think it will evolve significantly in the following years, is how sources use lists, for example. Right now we go in and we grab, sometimes, right? People go in and grab and actually sometimes put it into CRM without knowing that whether the candidate is ready to talk to me or not. And there is a little bit of, I've seen clients use it in different ways, and a little bit of ambiguity around that, and that kind of is going to become a little bit more, I think, guarded and basically considered, right? So hence, that's why I think we need to focus on those active engagements and not necessarily just getting a list and dropping it and trying to figure that out, but focusing on, like, hey, I need to have this active engagement with this candidate or this person who's potentially a long-term fit for the company, and really nurture that. And that's where I think AI tools can help too, right? So you're not necessarily thinking about purely as a list, but as a real engagement. And then there's no concern as much about data as long as your tools are centralized and focused. Right?
It's definitely not going away. I think that we're probably going to get better at the different channels that you have today. So referrals, people who are your silver medalist. We talked about people who've gone through a process. It's really important not to lose sight of those people and to keep them engaged in an intelligent, automated way. So we see those trends definitely more of a focused and more robust as it relates to AI.
Super, and I think Rupesh touched on this earlier, but just interested in, Jane, your thoughts on how AI can be used to help companies more effectively engage with college students and recent grads.
Sure. I think leveraging some NLP chat is a really great technology to reach out to recent grads or intern opportunities. I think the ability for a more efficient scheduling component, leveraging kind of just-in-time technologies. I also think that the way that we're evaluating somebody's kind of public profile and making assumptions on kind of capabilities, it's important to present kind of that next generation of AI where you're telling me where my gaps are. So how do I become that thing in an organization?
There's obviously last year, I think to some extent this year in the industry, there's a lot of talk around chatbots. Have any of you got experience with chatbots and seen good benefits from them?
We have. I think that kind of just-in-time information, I think, is really important to capture, competition, right? Efficiency, less friction. So the ability to give a job seeker the information that they're looking for in real time is very important. To get that feedback real time is important, and the next steps in the process. We see it heavily used kind of in the high volume most effectively.
Yeah, and combining, when you think about chat, right, it's not just about that chatbot interface, but all the conversations you're having, whether through text or WhatsApp or Messenger, and kind of that conversational or the engagement aspect. Most of our clients are seeing value in that, especially in the college scenario where now assessments or, there are tools available for video interviewing, assessments and things like that, which can put some scoring into your connection with the candidate. So there's a scale in the number of people you can reach out to, and then once they have connected with you, that conversation you can have is not now necessarily dependent on a recruiter. Obviously, you quickly figure out who your, gold medalists are or who those best fit candidates are, and you want your recruiter to call them right away so that connection happens. But then there will be a set of people who you want to ensure that are engaged over a period of time. I think we have had significant value in those conversations because some of those might not be ready yet, but maybe a good fit in the future. So kind of managing those pieces, especially in the scale, we have seen value from chat type technologies, which is not purely a bot on the web, which is great, but also the text messaging and WhatsApp and Messenger and all those other things, other ways of connecting to the candidates, which has become multi-channel right now.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits of real-time communication through a chatbot or sort of however you're facilitating it is it's the first sort of entry doorway into the culture of the potential employer. And I think if you're a new grad sort of coming into the workforce, then one of the most important things you can do is not to just go get sort of the highest paying job or the best sounding title or whatever it is, but to really focus on joining an organization that you feel is reflective of your values and who you are, and is a place that ultimately you're going to learn, because the first 5, 10, maybe even longer years of your career is really going to be about learning and growth, not about sort of how do I get sort of the highest paycheck or whatever I can. And so I think if you look at even the other tools that a lot of sort of the younger generations use now, they're all highly collaborative, real-time chat tools. And if you look at historically the recruitment market, which has sort of been post my resume up, apply for a job, and it's this sort of ambiguous black hole. So from our point of view, the more that we can enable these sort of real-time collaboration tools within our tool and provide sort of an entryway into the culture of that organization, the better sort of that new graduate student is going to have a feel for the organization they're joining.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a great point. I think for us, we've seen chatbots be used as a great user research tool. I think there's some really interesting vision and aspirations in that field. However, what it's exposing are how job seekers actually want to use them. What are the questions being asked? And right now, chatbots can't answer everything. They're just not that advanced. But it gives this insight on what really matters to the people that are on your website, because it's this free-form way of communicating. So it's a nice way to collect that data, and the companies that are really going to win are going to use that data as an advantage and then make their strategy around what users are asking them for. So it's a good way to do that.
Have any of you experienced some surprise findings for the company, your customers, after implementing this technology at all?
Not so much a surprise, but every question was, what's the status of my application? And the chatbot didn't know any better than the recruiter that was avoiding that question.
Excellent.
Yes, so I'm Faith Rothberg from College Recruiter, and we are fortunate today to have some students in the room and also students online. And so a student wanted to ask the question, how do I use AI in my job search? Which kind of goes along with what you guys are talking about.
Sure, I'll kick it off. I think the cool thing is that that student is using AI in his or her job search already without realizing it. When you go to Google and start your job search, a lot of those recommendations are based on AI and machine learning of other job seekers, and the actions that you're taking in a small way are incrementally making those results better. So a lot of that is happening transparently, which is nice, and it makes that experience better, and now it's also translating onto the career site as well. So off the top of my head, I can't think of a way that individual student could use AI, but he or she could definitely enjoy the benefit of it being used on a lot of technologies that's available to them at this point.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think that we looked at the use case earlier today with sort of these ambiguous job titles, and if you're coming out of school and you've got no idea what that job title means inside of a large organization, it's nice just to simply be able to put in what you're looking for and have relevant results come up. And so I don't think it needs to be as sort of dramatic as you are now entering the AI portal, but more that in all of the tools that you're using every day, that the results and their quality is becoming enhanced through AI and machine learning.
Yeah, and as a student, it's not about how you're using AI. As Joe and others said, it's part of the search experience, or it's part of how recruiters and others are going to work. But as a student, I think it will be good to know that these type of things are happening, and hence, what do I focus on as a student? I think I see a trend change probably where the students should focus more and more on I think they should be always focused on building skills, right, and kind of documenting those skills so that tools pick it up, right? So I think people spend a lot of time in the past on networking and things like that, which is important. But I would say, as a student, think about ensuring that you're building those skills and ensuring that those are documented so that these tools start picking it up and kind of make it part of their search algorithms and things like that. That's the only thing I can think about how behavior of students should change as basically AI becomes part of how recruiters work and how students work.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's not always how you're going to be found, but how you're going to be evaluated. So taking an inventory of your public profile, just making sure it aligns with the latest, selection tools that are available to companies.
Yeah, I think also, there's historically been this kind of pattern and behavior on the employer side to stuff job titles with certain keywords so that they show up in results for certain queries, and on the job seeker side, stuff your resume with certain keywords. Hopefully, with the proliferation of the technology, we can just get back to writing exactly,
What you did, yeah.
you did. So yeah, that's a great point.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm from Site Tracker in Palo Alto. I had a follow-up question about an earlier question. It was about the factors to consider when choosing AI, and it was something that Jane mentioned. You talked about how when establishing recruiting process and foundation, there should be standardization and checks and balances and correctional processes. Can you elaborate more on that?
Sure. I think we said that with standardization, there's some criteria that makes a decision, right? So there's patterns and they get repeated. So I think there needs to be visibility into what those patterns are. I also think that we are in its infancy, and there's things like personality impact on a team, somebody's experience on the ability to ideate and be innovative. And I don't know how we'll get there to capture those things, but I think there should be visibility in how your pool is being evaluated, so that you have the ability to potentially introduce some corrective attributes to that list. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Can you give some examples of maybe like situations that you've encountered where you'd have to, implement a correction, or maybe biases or personalities?
Well, I think there was a big example in the news recently was that the corpus, the brain that was the data set that was leveraged with, I think it was Amazon, right? So it had some biases against females. So all female colleges were not getting, or I think they're getting deprecated kind of inequality return. So I think understanding those levers is important as we venture into this world. But I believe that there has to be a stopgap of, talent qualifiers, meaning people, not necessarily sourcers, who's really understanding the selections that are being presented, and evaluate fit and all those great things that you need for a good hire.
And then, obviously culture is a big piece of every single organization. How are your customers approaching you at all, asking you for kind of solutions around culture? And yeah, Rupesh, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge part of, at Symphony Talent especially, we do both sides, kind of the messaging and the creative of the creation and the technology. So it's a conversation we have with our clients a lot about kind of how do we build the culture, how do we build that as part of our conversations with the organizations. And obviously in the assessment part, there is an aspect on, how do I ensure that they're a culture fit, and there's a lot of tools kind of coming, they're still in their infancy, but I see that kind of evolving. The other part is basically part of the messaging itself, right? Kind of by saying specifically certain things to certain, on your career website, clearly saying that this is who you are, kind of stands for that culture, and ensuring that those messages are resonating at the right levels is another way we have kind of typically, made that culture kind of explicit without kind of talking specifically about it, which kind of makes self-selection in many cases, because they're looking at those descriptions and they're looking at that experience and saying, hey, this is not for me. Kind of building that into your conversation helps make that cultural selection through the process of engagement with the candidate itself. So we've used a combination of assessment tools and basically those messaging and conversations to manage that cultural aspect for our clients.
I would also just add that for us, again, when we think about this from a technology standpoint, a lot of the use cases that we're trying to solve today, again, are the more sort of called administrative or cumbersome tasks that recruiters engage in. From my perspective, culture of an organization is one of the most important things that should matter to you as a job seeker. And if anything, we're trying to amplify that part of the discussion. Certainly for me, if I was joining a new company, regardless of even hypothetically, if AI could help solve this for me, I would still want to sit down and speak to someone. I mean, this is someone I'm going to spend 7 hours a day with. 5 days a week. I would want to understand the culture that I'm joining. But again, if we can take some of those more administrative tasks and the more high value work, which I think is sitting down and talking about culture and fit, then that's really the work of recruiters and job seekers that we want to be amplifying.
I love that you touched on that, because obviously these capabilities are allowing recruiters to have more time. We're essentially giving people back more time. So are your customers who have implemented these technologies being able to go on and have better cultural conversations and have more, one-on-one time with candidates? Have any of you experienced that?
Yeah, I think for us, getting the culture message across is about being honest and transparent, and sometimes technology adds a layer of friction to getting to that point. So for our customers, removing the friction of finding jobs that might have the job title in its own lingo, like some of those job titles up there I recognize because they're our clients. If you can take that out of the way of the process of getting to know the company, you'll get to that conversation faster. You'll get to know that process faster. And what we've learned is that even the way the interviews are held, the way that you get responded to by a recruiter, some of our companies are very empathetic to the whole process, and they're really holding your hand through it. And that's great. That's their culture. Doesn't mean it's better culture than any other companies. While others, they'll make you sit in the black hole, you get this amazing call, and then you're in the interview process and you could be hired very quickly thereafter. So I think the more we can take friction out of the way and let the job seekers experience the actual culture of the company, the better that process is for both sides.
Absolutely, and not just the culture, but also that face-to-face interaction, right? So when you meet someone, the presence in the room, things like that, which is what, depending upon certain jobs, you cannot put that into a resume and have AI match through that and all that stuff. That's basically an experience. You kind of meet Joe, and I say, Joe, hello, and I met him this morning. I'm like, I like this guy, right? So that conversation aspect, which basically is, I think, very different from putting your words in the resume, is, I think, what hiring managers and recruiters will focus more on than necessarily do they have this J2EE skill here, and all that stuff, I think, can get automated at some point, so that you're not searching on or conditions and if conditions and all that as recruiters, but having human conversations.
Yeah, I think the goal is to take away the low-value task work, right? Let's focus on recruiters doing what they do best, and that's selling the organization and the culture, and the opportunity to, have automation deliver the messages that correlate to the culture, and it's just happening behind the scenes, is cool. So.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Jones. My organization is Kelton Legend. I'm also an instructor at UC Irvine. I teach a course on technology, applications, and talent management. Grew up in recruiting, and one of the things that's been interesting for me is I feel like you hear from companies that volume interest is a burden more than it is a blessing, and where AI is used to find that one candidate. But what I'd like to understand is potentially in your product roadmap, and maybe even for Google, if I open up a rec and a minute later I have 300 candidates, I want to find those right 3 or 4 who really are my ultimate candidate slate. But how can you use AI to immediately evaluate the remainder of that active candidate pool to see how many other silver medalists are there? Or are there candidates that can be reallocated to current opportunities or future opportunities to really build a pipeline and help impact return on investment and then ultimately time to fill?
That's a great question. There's a lot there. I think it's a strategy on how you are building your talent pools, right? So we've seen a significant shift into not recruiting for a requisition, but maybe a segment of people that you are evaluating as a whole, and then being able to shift them. As an example, I have a community that I'm pooling for nurses as an example, right? Well, there's all types of nurses, right? There's ER, there's RNs, et cetera. So the idea of kind of qualifying in and communicating to that nursing segment, but then to let AI, build out the profile of a person against a job profile, which at the end of the day should help you pipeline to multiple jobs depending on the job requirements, location, years of experience, right? So if you think about that stack, AI is really meant, but it's kind of a shift in how you're setting up your recruiting efforts. You shouldn't be necessarily in these environments focused on requisition recruiting, but more of a pool that have like attributes.
Yeah, and from a technology perspective, that's exactly what Jane's point is exactly, I think, what actually all our companies are probably working with Google on kind of that aspect of profiles and how to kind of build the profiles and not just look at this as this candidate applied to this particular job, but when a recruiter goes to another job and, hey, this candidate applied for this particular job but was a silver medalist or maybe not even considered for that particular job, they might be ready for another job, and having that surface up in your talent pool. And that's exactly, I think, all of us probably have some version of that in our tools right now. And I think it's evolving, and I see that as a powerful differentiator for recruiters in the long run.
Yeah, I know we've touched on, from a candidate perspective, job discovery and being able to surface really relevant results to a job seeker. But I think the same is true about recruiters. So, for instance, one of the features that we employ today within our platform is the ability to semantically force rank candidates. And if you look, I mean, average corporate recruiter probably spends 5 to 10 seconds looking at a resume. If all you're doing is looking through those in chronological order, then you're wasting a lot of time in the day, right? If we can even get you sort of halfway there by saying, here's the 10 or 20, you should really be looking at, well, then not only can you sort of cut out sort of candidates that just did not make any sense for the role, but on the candidates that do make sense, again, you can spend more time on those high value added discussions.
Yeah, I think Jane started off really strongly. I think the concept of people being associated or attached to a job requisition is going to go away as AI gets better. I think you have an opening or availability in the company and you have a talent pool. And then ideally that talent pool is constantly growing and evolving, and AI will help you pick folks from that talent pool and then suggest them for openings in your company. So rather than just attaching themselves to that rec, I think we can get to a spot where it's these pools and you're using intelligence to then find the right people there. But that opens up a whole nother area, which I think is equally as important, where you're constantly validating these processes. We're seeing a lot of our companies and clients have IO psychologists in-house constantly looking at how the selection is made. Because we have to be honest and say, there is going to be bias in the system. We are going to hire more men than we should, but was the AI making the decision on their actual skills, or was it making the decision because it was actually biased against women and the schools they go to? So it's not just a single level or layer problem. You've got to be able to dig in deep. And as we make recs more fluid and rely more on talent pools and algorithms, we have to constantly be validating the process that goes along with it. So I think that it can accelerate things, but we also take a step back and slow down and look at how we're doing this and understanding where the biases are and how to remove them intelligently, not be paralyzed by them.
Super. Well, thank you very much to our panelists here. And that closes off the morning session.
Awesome. Thank you. So before you run away, we have a little gift. Thanks to Lynette and Doug Berg over at Zap Info. We have a book, Humanity Works. Probably many people in the audience picked one up as they walked in. This is from our second presenter, Alexandra Levitt. She's going to, I'm sure, talk a little bit about it. And Tarquin, you're not getting away so easy. Thank you very much. Thank you. I finished reading this in the plane here. And for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to read it yet, it's great. It talks a lot about technology and it paints a mostly optimistic view of where we're going to be, very consistent, I think, with a lot of the things you guys said. It also talks a lot about millennials, Gen Z, and it throws in, my favorite part, a bunch of little Gen Xer references to like 80s music. It was fantastic.